Let me welcome everybody. Let me welcome you to the Future Trends Forum. I'm your host, creator of the forum, and your cat herder for the next hour, Brian Alexander. I'm very glad to see and hopefully hear from all of you today. Before we begin, let me just introduce the forum. Let me explain where it comes from, how it's supported, and how it works, and then we'll dive into this week's topic with this week's guest. So to begin with, you should know that the forum is a discussion-based entity. This is all about conversation with other people. And it spins out of a not discussion-based project, the Future Trends in Technology and Education Report, or FTTE. Now, that's a monthly trends analysis that looks at the major trends reshaping education, from technology to demographics to economics to pedagogy. If you haven't seen it, just go to ftte.us. You can download a few sample copies and subscribe if you like. Now, the FTTE report and this Future Trends Forum are part of a broader project called the Observatory for Higher Education. So if you haven't seen this yet, just go to thefutureofeducation.us and you can learn more, because there we have everything from a blog to a book club. I should say a bit more about that before the hour is out, and a whole bunch of other things. Now, Tara, the next slide, please. The idea is to have a continuous, ongoing, open, discussion-driven exploration of the future of education. We really believe in having as many voices represented as possible, taking advantage of the technology, and making this as open as we can. Next slide, please. Now, before we explain how this works, we should explain how it's supported. And to do that, I'd like to thank some of our very generous sponsors. To begin with, NYSERNet from New York State. This is a non-for-profit that helps get that state's colleges and universities on broadband internet connections. They do fantastic work. They've been very good friends of the program, and we're very grateful to them for their generous sponsorship. We're also grateful to Shindig, because as you can tell, Shindig makes available this technology we're using now. So let me take a minute and walk you through it so you can see all the different ways it works and all the different ways you can participate. So where I am right now, and where the slide is just for another minute, is called the stage. And it's called the stage because everyone can see and hear everything that goes on up here. This is where the guest will be, and this is where you can join us. I'll show you how to do that. Right below us, if you look around, you can see a whole bunch of different icons. Some of them have people, so you can see, for example, Tan Hong Chi. Some of them are silhouettes, like Vicky Mast, and all of those represent one person or one sign-in from a location. And as you watch, you'll see they'll move from side to side as people come and go, and as people shift around, just like being a real audience face-to-face. Now, if you want to talk to somebody, if you want to say hello to them, just double-click on their icon. And if they want to talk to you, your two icons will click together like Legos. You'll have your own private audio-visual bubble, which is pretty neat. But how can you communicate with everybody? How can you participate with this week's guest? Well, look at the very bottom of the screen. You'll see a white strip running along it that has a few different icons. Go to the left edge. The leftmost edge, right now, you'll see there's a number. I think it says 53 or 54, and a bunch of human heads and a kind of dialog box. If you click that, up will pop two different options. One of them is a kind of film strip view of everybody who's here, so you can just mouse over and learn about the folks who are participating. And on the right is a chat box, and that'll let you just have a simple text chat with the 18 or so people who have come into this video conference with you. So you can say hello. People often share URLs, they pass jokes, they try out questions they'd like to ask. And so that's one really easy and convenient way to communicate and participate. Now back to that white strip, there are two other options. You'll see a question mark. If you click that, up will pop a little dialog box into which you can type your comment or question. And that's a really quick and easy way to get a question into the mix. So when the time is right, we'll pop up on the screen so everyone can see it, then I'll read it out loud so everyone can hear it. Now next to that question mark, you'll see a raised hand icon. And this is the most powerful. That tells us that you'd like to join us on stage. How do you do this? Well, if your microphone is working, your camera is working, and you're in a space where you can talk out loud, click that button and you can join us on stage when the time is right. It's really easy to do. You'll see how it goes. Just imagine it. Where I am right now, where our guest will be in just a minute, is a kind of panel. And you can join our panel as easily as walking up on stage. So click the raised hand to join us on video. Click the question mark to send us a text chat. Type in the chat box to say hi. If that's not enough, if you're a multitasker who uses Twitter, head over to Twitter and use the hashtag FTTE. And we'll be following that, and people can ask questions. In fact, we already have Vanessa Vale already posting a tweet right now. So those are all ways you can use to communicate with us, to ask questions of our guest, please take advantage of them, because this is about your questions and your thoughts. And we're really grateful to Shindig for making the technology available to let us all do this. We'd also like to thank one more group of sponsors, and that's our friends on Patreon. So if you haven't seen Patreon, this is a crowdfunding site like Kickstarter or GoFundMe. Those people support someone making stuff. In this case, it's me making the stuff about the future of education and technology. You can see from this image that there's a bunch of people, right now we're just about 100, who pay as little as $1 a month just to keep the lights on and keep things going. People who spend more than $1 get extra things like a private blog and video and discussion. If you're curious, go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander, or if you want, go to the very bottom left of the screen. You'll see about 3 kind of tan-colored widgets, and one of them is Support the Future Transformed Patreon. Click that, and off to Patreon you'll go. We're really grateful to everyone on Patreon who supports us. So, that's who supports us. That's how the technology works. That's what the forum is and where it came to be. Let me introduce this week's guest. I'm really, really delighted to have Nate Otto here. What is Nate going to be talking about? For centuries, colleges have given us what I think of as macro-credentials. You get an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, an MFA, a PhD. These are very important credentials that mean a great deal to higher education and mean a great deal to those who win them. But what if we could credential learning in other ways? Now, this is a topic that we've been exploring in the Future Transform for a couple of years. And what we're going to do today is focus on the alternative credentialing of microcredentials and badges. Nate is the director of open badges at Concentric Sky. He's been working open badges for years. He's a great expert to talk to you about this. So, Tara, why don't you bring him up on stage and we can start talking about badges and microcredentials. Greetings, Nate.
Hello, thank you for the invite.
Oh, thank you for coming. And I'm not just saying that because you're another bearded man. Where are you today, Nate?
Only a little bit. I'm located in Eugene, Oregon, where Concentric Sky has its offices. We're about an 80-person software development company, but today I'm calling from my home office.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I'm actually going to be not too far from you. I'm going to be in Portland in a few weeks.
Very nice.
And this is what people think of when they think of Oregon. They think of Portland.
That's true. Yeah, I'll often tell people that, introduce myself, say I'm from Oregon, and then they'll turn around and introduce me to someone else and say, here's Nate, he's from Portland, which is definitely, the best known cool city in Oregon. But I'm here to tell you that Eugene is also a really great city. Come and visit. Has a cool tech scene. Has great food, great weather in the summer, and even into the fall here.
Nice. Well, before we dive in and talk about microcredentialing, why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself, what you work on with Concentric, and your different projects.
Absolutely. So as soon as I heard of the idea of open badges specifically, I got really interested, and I knew that I wanted to help. And it took a few years to sort of filter out to Concentric Sky. I first heard about the concept when I was on jury duty, just following along on Twitter with some of my open education broader community members who are bringing up the idea. It was invented at a Mozilla festival in Barcelona for the most part. That's where I heard about it. A couple of years later, it had really turned into a real project. I got involved in the open community, participating with the Mozilla Foundation. And through that work, I found partners at Indiana University, Professor Dan Hickey, and I worked with him on research on the design principles documentation project for several years, or for about a year and a half, studying how digital credentials, digital badges specifically, were being used in the education space, formal and informal. And one of the main things that I discovered from that work was that a lot of the people who really had great ideas of what they wanted to do with microcredentials, badging, and these various technologies really didn't have the tools that they needed to make it happen. So at the time, I met Wayne Skipper, the CEO of Concentric Sky, one of our larger software development firms in the education space in Oregon, and he was really interested in the idea. And I pitched, hey, we could work together. We could build some badge technology, just that basic plumbing that makes the microcredentials ecosystem work together better. And he thought it was a great idea. We started the Badger platform, and so now Badger is one of the largest microcredentialing platforms available in the world. It is open source software. It's also free to use at our hosted location at badger.com, BADGR. no E in Badger. We're one of those hip companies that takes out a vowel in their name. And so now my life is organizing the product development team at Badger, interfacing with standards groups to make sure that all the companies that are working in this space that want to collaborate have the technical foundation and the protocols to talk to one another and build applications that work together to do microcredentialing things, but in a way that gives the recipients of badges the control of their own data, and the power to share their credentials however they want. These are the sort of the principles that drive us, and the things that excite us about microcredentials are the ability to really put that control into the hands of the users, as opposed to locking them into some giant centralized silo system.
Is anybody doing that with credentials? Are there any giant silo systems right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, to some degree. I mean, you can think of one of them being LinkedIn, of course, one of the largest platforms that there is where people go to talk about their professional accomplishments and to connect with others in the space. And all the data in that system is just, on one company's server clusters. And if you put something under your profile there, they make it available to all the users of that system. But the data is locked within that system, and it does not, it doesn't transport elsewhere. You can't really understand what you've done there when you go and sign in with your identities on other different platforms and part of your web life.
Now, let me just step back at a meta level. Friends, I have a whole series of questions I'd love just to interrogate Nate, and I could do this all day, but I would really like to hear your questions and thoughts. And he's touching a few things that might just spur some of your thinking. One is, think about your own work with badges, your interest in that. Are you, for example, as an institution or as an individual, issuing badges or using them? Second, to think about what this means in terms of open and user control. There's a key point in Nate's opening remarks that people get to control their badges. Unlike, say, LinkedIn, they get to have complete control of this. Is this something that works for you? And then further, this is about open, connecting open source as well as open education. How do you see badges and microcredentials clinging off of open education? It's something that we've been looking at for a long time in the Future Transform. So let us know. And again, click that raised hand, click that question mark, use the chat box, or throw something up on Twitter. We'll be glad to hear from you. Nate, one question I've got to ask to begin with is, and this is the economist in me, how is this sustainable? I mean, how does on the one hand, how do you manage to keep pumping out badge projects and standards like Badger, but also what sustains this whole ecosystem of creating, maintaining, and using badges?
That is an excellent question, and actually, that's a question and a topic that's really close to my heart, because I think that what we need to do in the credential space is to build an ecosystem that can become self-sustaining without just constant maintenance cost from the participants. And right. I think we're really headed in a great direction toward that ecosystem, partly because we use open standards and a lot of the implementations are open source software. So wherever the giants that have come before have left their projects, you can pick them up and you can, continue there. You can take them into your own spaces and you can become part of that engine that drives energy in this collaborative space. The open standards layer is also, really important because there are, open badges is one standard. There are several other activities at different groups in progress that are making it so that when companies and institutions get the idea that they want to do digital credentialing, they've got products that they can pull off the shelf or, off of GitHub, where they're open source, that help them do the workflows that they need to do. But right now, funding is a pretty significant thing. We're actually a for-profit company. We do mostly custom development in the education space. And I think that a project like Open Credentials and open source software that works in credentials is totally compatible with for-profit companies operating in the space. We do custom projects to tailor our offerings to a particular client's needs. And also we work with a number of projects, a lot of them nonprofit or grant funded, where they want to gain a new capability to do some sort of credentialing function. And because they have a mission of supporting the public and like really doing something interesting and new and providing new capabilities for the public, it's totally compatible with their mission to support a open source project as the foundation of what they want to build their little new layer of functionality. One of the great examples of that is Digital Promise, which is a congressionally chartered nonprofit that works on teacher professional development microcredentials, among many other initiatives. And for their teacher professional development microcredentials, they worked with us to build some custom software that can be released open source that provides the assessment and rubric-based competency focus on microcredentials that they felt really needed to be added to the ecosystem to serve that use case. We built that software. It'll come out open source, and their grant-based funding made it possible to give this cool new capability that is available across the ecosystem. So that type of thing is what really helps build the sustainability of this space.
Oh, that's a great answer. I'm glad to hear it. Well, then let's edge back into the education sector itself. What are the incentives for an educational institution to participate either in issuing or recognizing credentials? And by education institution, I mean, our focus here is on higher education, so you think colleges and universities, but we also do more than touch on libraries, museums, K through 12, as well as state governments and nonprofits that participate in the education space. I mean, what incents all of them to get involved in this?
Right. Well, you started this off with your discussion of the very traditional macro credentials that everyone really understands as one of the core functions of the higher education institutions. And yet this function is really only available to a certain slice of institution in the education space. And what micro credentials are all about, especially the standardized ones, is making visible what learning is occurring at different levels that were not previously available. It took hundreds of years to really build up this type of reputation-based paper certificate with a leather book type ecosystem that we had. And now that we have the internet, we have the ability to understand that the learning that's happening in these spaces is far more varied than what can be expressed in a paper format in a leather book. So the incentives for an organization on the issuing side to get into badging are not only to help the learners in their ecosystem understand and share and describe what achievements they have out and do things like get jobs or new partnerships with peers in their space. But it's also actually to make visible what learning can happen in their institutions. So for example, I love library-based use cases for credentials. There's a ton of awesome learning that happens in libraries that people don't often think of. There's everything from like a copyright or plagiarism training that all students have to go through to information about research practices, even reference assistance at a library. These are all really important activities that students go through in higher ed institutions that don't appear on their transcript. Microcredentials are a way to not only give that student something that helps them showcase their achievement, show it off to others wherever it's relevant, but also helps those students understand what type of learning is possible through that part of the institution.
And that also showcases the institution, giving a sense of its richness and depth to everybody else.
Sure. Yeah. Because whenever a microcredential is shared, suppose I put one on my portfolio or my website, or it's also a little bit of an advertisement for that organization that produced the credential and has the learning opportunity there. It helps spread not only trust in why you might think that I would be someone who you could work with, but also it helps you understand what you can do with institutions in your community.
No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I mean, the whole badge ecosystem is a kind of giant, large-scale level advertisement for learning as a whole. What about actually using these? I mean, you think about money. Anybody can make money. We can print something. We can call this auto dollars, but we can't convince anybody to take it. How do we convince people to accept badges? What have you learned from the years of doing this?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And so the first point I'd like to make on that is that badges are not different from other line items that you might put on your resume. If you want to present some experience that you have in your life, some learning that you've done, a workshop, or just a responsibility you had at a previous, put a line. You have to tell the story and curate, what you want to put on that resume, cover letter, and really describe that experience and tell the story of why your previous knowledge, experience, abilities fit the thing that you want to do next. A badge can be a storytelling tool just like that. It has cool extra capabilities, like it has a little visual symbol of that accomplishment, and it has the ability to verify and check back with the original issuer to ensure that, oh yeah, that really is authentic, and yes, this person really is the recipient of that recognition. But fundamentally, as a storytelling tool, it serves the same function as unverified assertions of your own experience. At another level, this is a lot harder because issuing badges, I find that to be the very easy side of the ecosystem. And understanding the learning and the achievements that are present in badges is a whole lot harder, a whole order of magnitude larger and harder. And that's why we make we really focus on making the issuing experience as easy and simple as possible, but we make that entirely free. And we're really focusing our development efforts at Concentric Sky, but also just in advocacy in the community, around this idea of how do you understand achievements that are represented by badges? What types of technological solutions do you need to do that? And then what type of practices do you put into your communities that really helps those communities have sort of badge literacy, to be able to take a look at a badge and know what it's telling you, how to analyze it, and how to decide whether to trust the informations in the badge. At my level, I really want to help take those decisions that are currently made by humans looking at badges. I want to take those to scale and embed those decisions in technology to help understand, like when someone has this badge that says it's aligned to a particular competency, to what degree do I trust this issuer to be a good authority on that competency, and how would that relate to a job profile that I've got over here that requires that competency?
Is there... I've got a ton of questions, and so let me just remind you all, friends, please don't let the one bearded man interrogate the other. Even if you have a beard, I'm happy to hear your questions and comments. So again, just pound in the chat box, where there's now 82 of you, or click the ask button, or click the raised hand button to join us on stage. We're happy to hear from you. I especially like to hear from your experience of either issuing or wearing or using badges this way. I'm fascinated, Nate, while people are thinking about this, by the different technological possibilities of this. Is it possible, for example, for us to analyze the entire ecosystem of badges? I mean, can we do a quick crawl and figure out what fields are the most likely to issue badges? And where can we do a gap analysis and what fields are missing badges?
To a large degree, no, you can't, because unlike those centralized systems, there is no centralized repository where all the badges live and where they're all available for looking. They're under the control of the various different entities that are holding them, the what we call backpacks or host providers, where individual recipients have their collection of badges. But those individuals are the ones who decide whether anyone should see their badges. They don't submit them all to a central space. And so often I think that building an ecosystem of software in this way, where it's very decentralized and data is under the control of many different parties, is a lot harder than building something like Facebook, where Facebook has reached 1 billion people, over 1 billion people, and yet it's just one company offering that. And when they decide they want to do something, they can roll a new capability out to all 1 billion of those users, within a day. Whereas
whether we like it or not.
Right, exactly, yeah, and that comes with costs as well as the benefit. The cost of building an ecosystem in a decentralized way is that you've got to go to a standards body and figure out, hey, let's describe this new capability, get buy-in from different participating companies and institutions, define the features that you want in a way that can be tested across different software, and then actually go out and implement. Which takes then means that innovation in the badges and micro-credential space is unevenly distributed across users. But I think in the long term, this is a more powerful way to structure an ecosystem, and of course, more ethically right, because you don't want to force everybody into using one particular company's solution. You want to give them the type of choice that academics really need in order to get their work done.
So this is a kind of classic open source versus proprietary code decision. I take your point about this. It makes a very distributed, very uneven, but very creative space.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, thinking about academics using this. We've had for a while the idea of a portfolio for assessment, where students would, and I think most people involved in this conversation have either heard or used such a thing, where students can assemble a series of their projects, exams, creative works, music, papers, that kind of thing. And that's very powerful pedagogically. It can be very time-consuming to consume. Is one of the advantages of microcredentials that it's really easy for an employer or a grad school or whomever to quickly scan someone's website and see which microcredentials they have?
Right. So as that storytelling function of badges, they do present information in a consistent format. So when if I'm sharing a collection of different open badges with you, you know that each of them is going to have a name and a description. The issuer will be described in a certain way. You'll be able to go get a contact email address for the issuer for each one. You'll have this very consistent set of capabilities that definitely supports the ability to scan through a list of them fairly quickly and start processing that information. In addition, because they're web resources that often have a URL associated with them, like when you go and share a badge through our Badger tools, you've got a little website that wraps that, and you can present it in HTML to someone with a URL, so it can be shared in a tweet or in a job application. All these places where we use URLs to transfer, pointers to information. So it's really easy to use badges to move that data. But at another level, this is the capability that we really need to scale. I would take to scale. We need to understand what people need to know about the badges, so really how they tie to the skills that you're looking for at a particular employer, and then how to process at that level of hundreds of applicants. How do you decide which 10 of them to interview? Right now, badges are really good, I think, at answering questions. Once you're down to your 10 applicants, you can take a look at them and see, what is the story that these badges are telling about this applicant. But at the 300 applicant level, you don't have time to do that with badges. And so we need to build technology that actually does what these HR systems do, to streamline the process of understanding a larger pool of applicants and what their profiles mean. The thing that makes it hard on that, I think, is that, again, the uneven distribution of badges in this case is that some of your applicants will have verifiable microcredentials. Some of them will have their experience represented as, bullets in text on a resume. And these two people might be equally experienced. So how do you build an algorithm that doesn't unfairly privilege someone with badges, or it has to treat these people correctly and fairly, even if one of them has not had access to a system where they've been granted microcredentials. So we in the badges community are exploring definitely some interesting ways to do that. When I focus on software projects at our team, we're building products like Badger Pathways, which allow you to set up job profiles and figure out which badges are matched to which skills, and how track people's large groups of people's achievement through learning programs. But there's a ton of other technologies to build, and because this is an open ecosystem, we cannot be the only company building solutions for it. I have about 10 or 11 people on my team building badges stuff at Concentric Sky, but there should be hundreds or thousands of developers that want to jump into this space. And if we've done our job right in the standards community and at this open source, open protocol level, it should be really easy for another developer at a different company to see a niche that they want to fill around this idea of understanding credentials at scale, and go in and build a little application, give that capability to an employer to use that app to understand badges. There's some really exciting work happening at IMS Global, which is the standards body for open badges. We're building a protocol called the Badge Connect API, which does this work of allowing a developer to know that when they invest in building a little application that serves just one little niche function in understanding badges, that they will immediately be able to connect to any Open Badges user using any of the available backpack host software anywhere in the world, because we don't need to get into the deep technical level in this call, probably. If anyone is really interested in diving into that level, I gave a recent talk on an Open Recognition Alliance community call where I have some slides you can look at, and you can definitely contact me directly. But we're building a system that allows a developer to create a new app and then be able to sort of log in with Open Badges in the same way that you can log in with Facebook or with LinkedIn, these centralized providers. But in the Open Badges sense, it's you can log in with your own selected Open Badges tool wherever you are in the world.
Wow, this is exciting. We're this emerging badge ecosystem software level that's beginning to take off. Before I press on that, we have a text question from one member of the community. Let's flash this up on the screen, please. This is from Baynard Bailey, who asks, does your software talk to Moodle and LinkedIn? We're just dipping our toes in the water at Vassar. Moodle is our LMS. We'd love any advice you have for us.
Cool. Yeah. Well, so excellent question. Right, because the importance of building this technology is to build it so that it's accessible to you no matter what tools you use. And at the standards level, we've got some good support there too. Another one of IMS's standards besides Open Badges is called LTI, or Learning Tools Interoperability, and that allows many different learning management systems, including Moodle, to embed tools from providers. And I don't need to build my tool specifically for Moodle. We do have a tool that is compatible with Moodle that allows you to do the tracking of badge awards. This is our Badger Pathways tool, and it gives you an embedded sort of RPG-like skill tree showing a student's progress through a set of badges that you've set up at your school. You set up a learning program. The learning can occur across maybe multiple different courses, maybe some in the library, some at student orientations, and each of those pieces of learning is tracked with a badge. Our tool gives you a one-click ability for a student to, get into Moodle, see that My Pathway link, click that My Pathway link, and they see right in their Moodle experience which badges they've earned along that pathway. As far as actually triggering the issuing of badges within Moodle, Moodle does have a built-in Open Badges compatible system, and I know that they are currently working on upgrading that system to support the newest version of the Open Badges standard 2.0. So you can use Moodle's built-in features for that. You can also use things like Zapier or If This Then That, IFTTT, to automate some actions that will react to certain things happening in your Moodle courses by triggering a badge award at a badging system such as Badger. So if you want a specific sort of Badger-related answer, definitely contact us at Badger, and we can see what it is that is the right solution for your Moodle-based use case. But in general, yes, you should connect your tools to badging systems when you want to award or recognize learning. And there's a whole bunch of cool stuff you can do at that understanding layer that I'm really excited to work on, as exampled by our Badger Pathways tool.
Well, thank you for the great question from Vassar, and thank you for the really rich answer, Nate. It seems like we're really seeing this field grow. Friends, if you haven't done this before, what Baynard did was he just clicked on the Ask button at the bottom of the screen, typed in the question, we flashed it out, I read it. That's how easy it is to do. And we have a couple people getting in line for the video right now, so please just click the raise hand if you want to do that. Looking ahead a bit, Nate, I'm curious about where this could go with some emerging AI. That is, would it be possible to build an algorithm that could, for example, assess a given field's use of badges? Could we have an institution running software that may actually issue badges itself? I mean, where do you think the whole general AI? I mean, I don't just mean neural networks. I don't just mean general adversaries. I mean, where do you think that could go with badges?
Yeah, and so when you asked your question earlier about, is it possible to understand, the badges ecosystem writ large, and I said no, that's one layer of the answer. But the other layer is that it is really important to try and do that, and to build systems that will take whatever slice of data that is, shared with you and use that to try and understand what badging activities occur. And so to that end, directory services will probably be a really interesting source of data. We at Concentric Sky are prototyping a directory that we use in our Pathways tool. It's called BadgeRank. And so if you go to badgerank.org, you can check my domain, badgerank.com and .org. Yeah, you can get just a search engine for badges that have been defined by different organizations. And so we'll be continuing to improve the data sources there. Different issuer partners are working with us to provide feeds to the badges that are being created on their systems. With the permission of the users on those systems, they'll give us a direct feed to understand, be able to pick up the new badges being defined there as soon as they're made. And through the use of that tool, then you could start indexing and really understanding what badges are being used everywhere. Really, this ecosystem, even though it was invented in around 2011, sort of really started showing up in software around 2012 when I joined the movement. It's really still in its early days. It's not distributed across every institution out there. We're working with several thousand institutions, mostly in higher ed ourselves, but there still are thousands more of institutions that either have never used badges in any capacity or who are only using them, at one or two instructors at a time. Great place to start, but this has massive room to grow. And so even what you see out there right now and what you can understand about how badges are being used is hopefully, if we're successful, this will be a very tiny slice of where badges are in 10 years.
Wow. I'm really glad that we've got you now to talk about this. We have a video question coming up, but also a quick text question from Angelica Solich, who asks, if we want to get a credentialing system that is not tied to an LMS, what do you suggest? Looking at Badger and Credly, but have no idea how to compare microcredentialing systems, since we need a system and a host for the system. I'm just reading that question. Yeah. I'm not sure I follow it. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the places where learning occurs and is tracked is in an LMS. But of course, that's not the only place that even higher ed institutions track the learning that's occurring and being assessed. For any badge system designed to be successful, it's not just a matter of making pretty pictures and deciding what you want to recognize. It's a matter of doing that in concert with with designing the practices for how those badges will be assessed and delivered to users. So it is totally possible to build all sorts of different assessment mechanisms that don't occur through the LMS and aren't tracked through the LMS. But the badging can be a way to connect the activities that are happening in the LMS and are badged there with activities that are assessed outside. So all of the badging platforms on the market, including the few that you mentioned, do support manual awarding. Often you can upload spreadsheets of various different people who have earned it. So if you have like a whole workshop where 300 people attended, you want to recognize their participation or engagement with the topic material there, you can recognize them in bulk with badging. Or there are integrations through APIs. And really all of the leading badging platforms have that capability. That's sort of the base level, is that yes, you can do this with every system. There are significant differences between the pieces of software and the services on the market. I don't think this is really an appropriate sales call, but definitely reach out to the companies that you're interested in that have capabilities that look pretty close to what you're trying to do, and understand what how that would work with your system, and also understand where those platforms are going. What are the parts of this ecosystem that those companies are most excited about implementing, and does that fit with your mission? Because there are differences in focus, because the general purpose technology is, it's open standard. We all implement up to this sort of basic level, but then each of us has our own passions and ideas about, what makes a great commercial product or a great partnership with a educational institution. And you'll find the dating app that'll help you match up with a badging provider of your choice. It's a great fit.
There's always the dating application metaphor that comes in.
Yeah, right. So IMS, our standards body, does have a directory of platforms that are certified as compliant, and so that's one source where you can go there and take a look at what platforms on the market. They have a little blurb about each one, and but then definitely reach out and do a little bit of research. The cost of switching between one platform and another, it's not a lot of money because you just sort of stop using one and start using another. But the amount of investment that you make in a badge system design that really deeply integrates the tools made by a provider, that's a lot of investment of your time, energy, and often money. And so you do want to make a pretty good choice up front. And it's worth spending a little bit of time checking out the different options and seeing who works for you.
That's a good answer. Quick question, Angela asked, which was the last tool you were talking about? Was IMS? It was the IMS directory?
Yeah. I'll share a link to the IMS directory of certified products in the chat.
Okay, very good. Again, excellent question, Angela. And if you're all joining us for the first time, it is that easy to ask questions, especially if you're brilliant people like you all asking these terrific questions. And speaking of terrific questions, here's Steve Taylor, also coming to us from Vassar in upstate New York. Steve, I think your mic is off. I think you're muted.
Should be on now.
Yeah. All right. Greetings, Steve.
And hi, everyone. And I think you were getting into this just a moment ago, talking about different platforms. And I guess there's platforms for creating badges and there's platforms for hosting badges. And I wanted to ask about thoughts about different hosting platforms. I know about Credly, I know about Mozilla, and it seems to me that if we're going to make badges that are available for, say, our students or other people in our community, we want to make it easy for them to take them out of our LMS, say, and put them on some platform, presumably something that would be most useful for them in their future endeavors, looking for work or grad school or whatever. So it would seem that I would be looking to see what is the most mainstream thing or the thing that's most acceptable, what works with LinkedIn or whatever.
Sure, yeah. I mean, those are great considerations. Sure, yeah. So there are, like I said, there are several different platforms. I work at Concentric Sky where we build the Badger platform, and that's one that has a certain set of capabilities. So one thing when you're comparing, you have to know what roles your applications are going to fill in your system, and then sort of plug in a piece of technology to fill all of the different roles that you'd like to have. In the open badges space, there is a role called issuer, and many of the organizations that are producing software fill that issuer role. There's dozens of pieces of software that do that. Credly is one of them. Open Badge Factory, Badger all do issuing role, and sometimes that capability is built into an LMS, like it is with Moodle. And they'll be upgrading to the latest version, 2.0, in the coming months. There's another role, which is called the backpack or host role, and that one is only filled by a couple different players in the space. Badger is one there, and that's the provides the capabilities that allows a recipient to manage badges that they've earned, bring in badges from other systems, like other issuing systems that use the Open Badges standard, and then share those all together as representations of their experience. There's a couple options there. The Mozilla Backpack is one, Badger is another, the Open Badge Passport is a third, and there's a MyMantle platform that also has that capability, as well as issuing and displaying. The Mozilla Backpack, one thing this summer, Mozilla announced that this software is no longer being maintained. They don't have engineers on the Mozilla Foundation team anymore that do that work. And so actually that software will be sunsetted, and all of the users will be given an opportunity to switch over to a Badger Backpack platform. So we will be taking over the maintenance of the Mozilla Backpack. And so I definitely... That software has sort of been in a stable, like non-changing state since 2013 or so. The capabilities have not grown, but we really want to make sure that the users there have the latest and greatest. So we worked with Mozilla over the spring and summer to start coming up with a plan where we give those users the ability to switch over to an install of the Badger platform. So they'll be getting free accounts on Badger and all the new abilities that Badger's built in the meantime. So in addition, all the platforms that are existing, like have current integrations with the Mozilla software, will not break. We're going to build a perfect switchover mechanism where that mechanism, the existing push to Mozilla Backpack will just change over to push to Badger, and it will give the user the ability to download their badge right there, take it wherever they want if they don't want it in Badger, or the ability to create an account and push it there. So make sure that you understand sort of what different capabilities you need. Like, so if you want to provide a backpack solution, make sure you're picking one that works there. If you've got, if you need to issue badges, then you need to have the capability to do that through one of the issuing platforms or pieces of open source software, or built into your LMS. And just make sure that you've got all the workflows represented to get the badges from where they're starting, say in the LMS, to the user, the earner of them in their backpack.
So a follow up.
Go ahead.
Moodle, for instance, is an application that is integrated with Mozilla Backpack, and so create a Moodle badge. It can be published there. So that's one of the ones that you mentioned will be automatically kind of converted to a push to Badger instead.
Right. Yep. So Moodle, as they upgrade their issuing capability, they'll implement, or they'll probably just keep the existing sort of push to your backpack thing. But once this transition happens, which we don't have the exact timeline on, but around the end of this year, that'll just become to a push to open badges capability, where the user will be able to select what backpack they want it to go to, including, of course, a free Badger account if they like.
Excellent question, Steve. And really, really deep answer, Nate. I really appreciate how far that went. And this gives rise to more questions. Tara, I think we have another video question, if we can beam them up. And thank you again, Nate, for diving into such great detail. I really appreciate that. We have Ryan Harrell.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Ryan. Yes, where are you from, Ryan?
Great. I'm from Southern Adventist University here just outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Weather's finally cooling down here, so we're all glad. It's been the 90s for the last 3 weeks. So, so I have a question that, again, it's sort of related to what we've been discussing in the last bit, and I can give you more background on what we're trying to accomplish if you would like. But my primary question is related to this problem of creating an environment in which learning experiences happen that then are turned into badges. We have ended up developing something ourselves as a result of there not being something that fit exactly what we wanted in the market. But we ended up going with XAPI and their LRS infrastructure as kind of our tracking mechanism. And I was just wondering what experience you have, if any, in working with XAPI and using the LRSs to trigger badge provisioning from that end.
Yeah. So, okay, for folks who don't know about XAPI, this is a sort of a messaging protocol that allows one system to describe a learning event that happens, with about a certain user's learning, and it can collect all these different learning events from different systems controlled by an institution, put them all into one learning record store, and then that LRS can be queried by other systems in order to transform those events into something else, such as a digital badge. We have not built a solution that directly integrates with LRS yet, although we do have several partners who are interested in setting up a contract for some custom development on that. So I've taken a look at it. At the standards level, I've worked with the XAPI core team several years ago to get a little open badges extension published that helps come up with some recipes where they could decide automatically to award a badge based on criteria being met by different statements that come in. I'm not sure how far that project went in any implementers thing, but overall the concept is a great fit for badges. Badges really call out for the automation once you want to award them at scale, and so that automation could come either from within the LMS, where the LMS triggers the award directly, as is implemented in a bunch of platforms, or sort of one layer more separated in the ecosystem, like through processing through many different statements about learning in an LRS. And then those statements can actually be transformed into descriptions of work or evidence that is related to the badge. So it can be a great fit. It often at this stage, I think, requires some custom development work to really make it happen. But I'm tracking efforts at several places, including my own company, to help sort of automate that process in a way that we could sort of productize and make it so just a capability you could pull off the shelf.
Well, I'd love to talk with you more about that at some point, maybe outside of this
definitely.
call.
To you or to anyone else who's interested in, talking about doing a particular thing with badging that would work for you, we love talking to our users and potential users, and I'd be happy to set up a call to investigate that.
Just on the theory of badging, in terms of like larger picture things, what we realized going in is that we had a lot of content development happening on our campus in the course, in individual courses in the individual departments across the campus, that that content was staying in a course. Nobody else knew that that content was there outside of that course, but that content was more applicable than maybe just that single course could provide. So our goal, our end goal in all of this development is to provide pathways to access that learning outside of taking the entire course and outside of even maybe being enrolled in our institution, providing a marketplace where continuing education users can benefit from that expertise in chunked form, breaking it down into much smaller pieces that then can be authenticated through badging. So that's our big push that we're looking at doing, and why we've approached this kind of custom development. Just to give you some background on what
excellent.
The goal is.
First of all, I love the word that you've used, the word pathway. Because I think that is a great way to understand badge system design, is how do you present what the available learning pathways are to users. And in fact, we believe so much in this concept that we built a whole application called Badger Pathways. Got some amazing UI, UX for looking at a badging journey through this sort of skill tree-like metaphor, where you can see what is all available. As far as integrating that into a course, of course, we have our little LMS like LTI plugin, which can show a user their progress on that pathway very easily. But it also applies at the level of the course design. And so, for example, if you wanted to free that piece of content or that learning activity from the course and make it available sort of as a little micro-credential, micro unit, that's available, in several different contexts. That's a great reason to use badges, because you can create an assessment process that triggers the award when a student goes through whatever the little micro unit is, and then that badge can be the thing that is actually included in different courses, as opposed to the original piece of content. Is that content, you don't want it just to get locked in that one space. You want to give it the little micro accessibility where someone can jump right into just that thing, if that's the just-in-time learning that they need to do. And then it can be linked through the badge. Like I said, the badge is sort of an advertising opportunity for what learning is available. That can be, in the context of this course, assign the badge as opposed to assigning a piece of content. And the content is just the way that you get to that badge.
And we're seeing that also in the inverse, where if we have people who have taken these continuing education badges, we don't want them to have to retake that content if they decide to go through a course. So the goal is to pipeline them from completing these in a context that's outside of maybe even the auspices of our actual accreditation, to be able to pull in a certain amount of that content into the course itself so that it's reusable in both directions.
Absolutely. Great design.
Well, thank you for that great question, Ryan. I really appreciate the dive into what you're doing. Nate,
your audio cut for me there for a second, Brian.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you again both for the great question, Ryan, and the deep dive into what you're doing at Southern Adventist. And thank you for the great answer, Nate. We have time for maybe two quick questions. We have one from chat from Chris Dobson, who has a very quick question. He says, do you know, has IMS Global Learning Consortium done any new development with the Open Badge Educational Standard?
Yes, okay, so I believe what you're talking about is this Open Badges Extensions for Education task force that was active in 2016 for the most part. They did produce versions of extensions. They have two extensions, one which allows a system to describe the assessment that goes into a particular badge in terms of here there will be a test. It will have it will be multiple choice, and it will take you roughly 60 minutes. It provides some different properties that allow you to describe that in a general sense. And then a second extension allows an issuer to describe, I represent an accredited organization, and here is contact information for my accreditor. Those are published extensions that may be used by various different issuing platforms. To my knowledge, there is no one other than Badger that has implemented those. Badger has implemented the assessment extension. We don't have UI for it in our editing interface, but we have a client using it. It actually is the Digital Promise project. We embed rubrics that allow you to describe, here is a grading rubric that we will use, or more than one, for as part of the assessment of this badge. And then we actually use that data to present on the storefront in the Digital Promise Microcredentials application that allows users to understand exactly what type of evidence they need to submit to prove their competence and how they will be assessed on that. And that uses the OBEE extension. And I was actually involved in updating that extension about a year ago to add this rubric information. So that's an example of how the Open Badges spec and community is open to innovation that doesn't go through the full heavyweight process. We did work a little bit on the edges of the IMS work group on that, but for the most part, it was Concentric Sky and a client, Digital Promise, working together to decide, like, hey, we want to add rubric data to badges. Here's a way to do that. This is the type of data we want. We modeled it all out, and then we built a proof of concept and implemented it. And the Open Badges extension system, which Concentric Sky helped author in 2015, allows for the validation of that data, so that any issuer that wants to put rubric data into a badge class, we can tell whether they've done it right and whether it's going to be renderable into a system like our Digital Promise Microcredentials storefront.
Well, Chris, that was a fantastic question. And in the chat, Nate, you just made Chris very happy, so that's really good. And we have time for one last question. And this is a doozy. Tara, if you could flash this on the screen. This is from another Chris, from Chris Gamrat. I've been reflecting on the adoption of badges as innovation. What do you think of the hurdles that prevent adoption of badges? I mean, you've been in this field for a while.
Yes, indeed, and I've seen a lot of hurdles. I've jumped over several myself. Yeah, I mean, great question. There are lots. It still is not quite easy enough to just get started issuing badges, and particularly a lot of that is what we discovered at the Design Principles Documentation Project, is that the actual badge system design, a lot of people really get ambitious about what they want to do with badges, and they get this really big, complex pathway that people want to move through, and then they don't quite have the ability to like jumpstart on the assessment process, or they haven't quite figured out exactly how badges will be, how you'll make that decision that now is the right time to award the badge, and this is the evidence that I'll put in that badge. So starting small is a great idea, so that you can learn exactly like what you want to do, starting with very simple tools. Things like Google Forms and manual like awards are great. Discover what you want to do before you try and jump to scale and pay someone to build an automation system for you, for instance. And I think the tooling that's out there now definitely supports that, like start small type pilot program. And I'm really excited that the work we're doing at the standards level is going to make it more and more possible for specialized tools to be built that connect into the right spots in the ecosystem and just, are all focused on exactly like one little hurdle, getting over one little hurdle, build, for example, just a workflow that like we have an app that allows you to award a badge for conference attendees when they scan QR codes. That's a little app that can connect into this broader ecosystem and can get you over one of those little barriers to adoption. The much bigger questions, of course, are on the understanding side. How do we integrate the understanding of achievements represented by badges in our systems? And I'm really excited to work with all the folks on the call, other folks in the community, to really tackle those questions.
Well, I'm really glad that you handled and tackled and jumped over all these great questions today. We're out of time. We've just shot past our hour at top speed, powered entirely by your energy. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your expertise, your vision of where this could go. You've just been an absolute delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite, and thank you everyone for attending and for the great questions.
What's the best way for people to keep up with you? On Twitter?
Definitely follow me on Twitter. I'm Ottonomy, OTTONOMY. It's linked in the bottom corner of this chat. And we have an Open Badges hashtag on Twitter where there's a lot of discussion. There's also a mailing list on Google that you can get to. I'll share the link to that in the chat.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, please
And
keep an eye on this.
Check out my products at badger.com.
Of course, of course. Thank you again. Thank you again. But don't leave, everybody. We have to talk about the next week and what's coming up. And so while we put that slide up, let me just thank you all for your great questions. This has been a really fun deep dive into credentials. Next week, we're going to shift ground and talk about new learning spaces. And what's great is it's a double header. We have two wonderful people, Lisa Steffens and Rebecca Frazee, who will be talking about flex space. So that is going to be talking about ways that we can reorganize learning spaces from libraries to classrooms and so on. But it's also a great project. It's an open online collaborative project for sharing information about these new learning spaces. So I'm really looking forward to next week with FlexSpace. Now, we're also looking forward to next week because you get to hear this first before anybody else. Our book club starts again. We have a new book, the awesomely titled Twitter and Tear Gas from Zainab Tufekci. This is a book about online technology, both mobile devices and social media, and political protest. It came out last year. It's been a sensation. She's become a star of the whole world of thinking of politics and technology. So we're going to start reading that ASAP. So now is a good time to get your copy of the book. And if you want to get that copy of that book and you want to get more books, go to the bookstore, the Brown Alexander bookstore. If you want to keep all this conversation going, we're all over social media in the right spots. So there's a Slack group for this, there's a LinkedIn group, there's a Facebook group, and naturally we are on Twitter. Once again, thank you all for your great questions today. Thank you for your great comments. It's been a real pleasure. Look forward to seeing you online, and then we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.